Alright, well, on to part 3. We are going to be doing the body, which consists of the neck, the torso, the stomach, and the pelvis, and everything in between. To start off, we are going to move our camera down. A lot of camera isn't necessary. I just prefer to have a high quality view when I render, and it's easy if you want a full view to just turn the camera off. There we go. Everything is covered. We are going to grab the body composite, pull this up, and give ourselves more room by moving the head away. We're going to go through sections. So we will start off with the neck. The neck will also need a cutter. So the neck is going to come down and extend past this area. And then this is going to be a cutter that cuts off the lower section. We can also include this bumpy section because even though it's kind of more attached to the t-shirt, it's going to move with the neck. There's no instance where it's not going to move. It looks like it's going to be dark on the outside, so we can have this as one piece, and then we can have this as a second piece, and then maybe have a cutter in here to cut off the t-shirt. So we're going to have a collar and a collar cutter. And let's start with the t-shirt. So you can make this entire piece its own section, but we're going to have, the sleeve here and then the shoulder, which is this section. So we can actually just have this t-shirt as its own piece and this belly section below as its own piece as well. And then we're going to get to the busiest section, which is the pelvis. So we're going to want a pelvis piece. So that's going to be the entire shape. We're going to have a pocket, so pocket 01. We're going to have a zipper, which is this front piece. We're going to have a crotch, which is this piece down here. And we'll get into the belt. So we want the belt as a whole piece. We want the buckle. And we're going to start rotating around the rig to just see how this belt moves. So this little tail seems like it will be its own section, so belt end. And at most, the belt will have 4 spots. So we can make multiple, so 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5, then 6, 7, 8. That's gonna be a lot to handle. And unless you're like tweening a lot, having this one suddenly become this one won't make that much of a difference. So at most, we only ever see 4. So we're going to have 4 belt loops. We'll make the one and then we can copy and paste it. And as we rotate, we see that there is this white line, which is the stitching on the jeans. So we can call it pocket cutter or we can call it stitching. And then we're going to have a back pocket and a butt crease. This lower section is going to be the crotch from the front. And we forgot to add these little sections from the belt hoops. We're going to mess around with the spacing more since we're going to have to duplicate a couple of things. But for now, we are going to if you've seen the last part, which you probably have. So we're going to replicate everything that we've done over here. So we're going to give everything an off instance. We're going to give everything an instance 1. We're going to give everything a top peg. Now that everything has a off and on instance and the pegs are lined up, we are now going to just go through and draw everything. Everything is pretty simple to understand. A lot of lines, a lot of squares. So just trace. The one thing I think I might do, I was originally going to have this piece just bend right here, but I might have it extend, to follow the pivot, and we'll put in a cutter here with a back piece. So if the torso moves in like this, we can actually see the inside of the jeans. So I'm going to do that. For the pocket, rather than having the shape go inwards, so having the shape like this, we're going to have the shape go outwards, so you can technically put the hand into the pocket if you need it. This section is going to be an invisible cutter that's going to cut the hand. We are going to also include a shirt interior to go behind the shirt like this in case it lifts up and you need something to show that there's a back to it. Everything is drawn, so we are going to go through and start applying the forms. Remember, like last time, you select the drawing, you go to create new deformation chain, create the deformation chain first on all of the drawings, and then we'll go back and start applying the formers. now that everything has a deformer, like so, we can go and start adding any extra points that we need by holding Alt, like so. We're going to add those points and then we're going to go color everything in. Because we want the belt buckle to be both in front and behind the belt, we're just going to fill it in on the line art for now, and then when we're layering stuff, we'll come back to this. Now with everything important colored, we're going to go through and start applying the cutter color to anything that is going to be cutting. I'll do this in real time just to kind of show what we need. So we're going to place the color just anywhere on the line art or color art, remove it and put it on the underlay. And we're going to go through and do this for everything that requires a cutter. And lastly, we're going to add in these shoulder sections. So I was originally going to have this just be the entire shoulder. I don't think that will work well in a lot of the poses, especially here. If this character was to try and lift their arm up, I think it would just be easier to have a shoulder piece that is semi-invisible and then have this internal piece that you can move and connect. So we're going to add in these corner pieces. Now it's time for the actual rigging section. We're going to start from the top and go down. So we'll start with the neck, go to the torso, go to the pelvis. First of all, the collar. We need to work out what's going on here. So anything that is green, we're going to take a line art and an underlay. Plug the line art in, plug the underlay in, but don't connect it. Do that for the other one. So now we can see a little bit better. The neck cutter is going to have to do its job, so we're going to have to cut it. Cut the neck by the underlay. And we want the line of the cutter to be gone, so we need to connect the cutter, invert it, and plug in the neck. So now this is the neck cutter. For it to be a bit more visible as a handle, we're going to grab the line, go to the overlay, paste it, change the color to a tab, and we're going to plug this in to our tab down here. and cut away any extra. So now we have a visible cutter. If you want to be tidy, you can click the rope, make a waypoint, and then move it over like this. That's just so you don't get confused with all the wire. So that is done. Time to focus on the collar. We're going to need two things. If we turn on our reference, you'll notice that the collar connects to the body. So we're going to take a line weld, plug it in, and connect it to the shirt. So now it should connect properly. We actually made a mistake with the collar, and we should have the cutter be down here rather than up top. So instead of remaking things, we can just grab it, pull it down, and repose. Because the point of this cutter is to cut this section so they transition into one another more seamlessly. So we want to give the collar a cutter. Cut it by the underlay, and we turn off our reference. There we go. And we can just delete the line. We don't have to worry about this little corner section because we can pose it to cover it, but most likely it's going to be connected to a side piece. Let's move on to the torso and shirt. Straight away, our main focus is to get the shirt, put a line weld on it, because this is where the arms are going to connect. So this is where a line weld would go. It will actually, because we have things that are going to be layered very differently, it might be easier to go into line weld and just grab the networking, so we have a bit more freedom on the outside. So we want the shoulder piece and the logo to be between the line and the color art, just for anti-aliasing reasons, and we're gonna have a lot of issues trying to connect this piece with the shoulder piece without causing anti-aliasing. So it's going to just save us some time by making it between the line and the color art of the shirt. We're going to take the line, copy it, go to the overlay and paste it, and we're going to delete where the reference stops. This is so when the character's arm is going behind the body, all we get is this little shirt crease, and then anything up here is going to go invisible when interacting with the arms. It'll make more sense once we get to the arms. The torso is going to be fine by itself, and the shirt interior is also going to be. We're going to cut both the shoulder connection and the logo. The logo is going to get cut by the color art and inverted. That's just so it will stay inside the body and go behind the line without causing any anti-aliasing issues. And the shoulder connection is just going to get connected by the entire shirt and invert cutted. Again, you won't see the effect of this until the arms are made and connected to the torso. But the short of it is, if we unplug the line, you can see that this connective bit is fully covering the arm. We're now going to hide the top pieces and focus on the pelvis. Like we did at the start, anything that has green is going to get a line art and a underlay. These are going to cut the respective parents. So the belt end loop is going to cut into belt end, and the belt loop is going to cut into the belt. As you can see, it's just taking away. And for the reverse, because we don't want the circle to be able to leave the belt, cutters on the line arts, cut them by the respective parent, and then invert them so we can see them. A lot of this is going to just be logical. What is cutting into what? What needs what? Is this thing invisible? Is it not invisible? Why is this thing not working? Mess around with it and figure it out yourself. You can look up tutorials and find specific examples. Maybe there's a rig that you saw that can do something. Download the rig and look into it and see what they did to solve that one issue. So the buckle only has information on the line art. So we're going to plug the line art in. We're going to plug a color art in, but put the color art behind everything else while the line is in front of everything else. And we're going to go to the line, go to our paint tool and close gap. Hit K on your keyboard so you can see the invisible lines. And we're going to just make a little stroke up and down like that. So everything on the right over here is going to be in front of the belt, and everything on the left is going to be behind the belt. We can copy the whole thing, put it on the color art, so now it's separated. And then on the line art, because we only want this side in front of the line art, we can hold T to get our cutter and just swipe. Swipe, swipe, until everything is gone and only this side remains. If you have anything like this where you have like a little nick, that is because the line is stumped. So you want to go selector, go to start, round, end, round, and that should solve any issues. Seems to also be visible on the back piece. There we go. So now this piece is in front and behind the object. And lastly, the belt. The belt is going to get cut by the pelvis. But if we cut it by the pelvis, it's only going to be on the outside. So we're going to invert it so it's on the inside. Looks correct, but if we go to our reference, you can see that the body line is actually cutting away the belt. So we can solve this by making the connection a auto patch instead. Again, this will cause some anti-aliasing. It's very slight in my opinion. I don't think it's extremely noticeable unless something is like a really close up. But there's ways around it, but I think this looks fine for what it is. So the belt is done. The last thing we need to do is the pelvis. Pretty much everything. So the back pocket, the stitching, the pocket, the butt crease, and the zipper all just need their own composite. Remove the connection from the base composite and then plug that in. Give everything an invert cutter because we want everything to be inside of the object, and cut it by the pelvis. There you go. You've now cut 5 things inside of the pelvis extremely quickly and saved a lot of space and time. The pelvis itself is going to want a line weld because just like the t-shirt, the pelvis is going to be cutting into the legs. So it will need a line weld. For the pelvis cutter, it's green. So what does that mean? Line art, underlay. We only plug in the line. We connect the underlay but don't plug it in. And then we cut into the pelvis with the underlay. So that is going to remove this section of the pants. And then we're going to, again, invert cut the line to keep the line inside of the pants. There we go. We actually want kind of a 3D effect. This will make the character look very flat if there's not an interior piece. But instead of doing an interior piece, we can actually cheat. So we can take the line of the pelvis, go to the underlay, fill it with the pants interior. So there's now an interior section with a darker color, and this is visible on the underlay, which is currently being cut. So we can take the underlay out of the group and plug it in behind everything. So over here, it's now plugged in behind everything. So now there's a interior section of the pants. And if we turn our t-shirt and pelvis back on, it'll cause this more 3-dimensional effect. I also adjusted, so normally everything was layered like this, but because the pelvis is pretty much always going to be in front of the torso, I moved both the belt and the pelvis up. The crotch is fine as it is. I removed the lines inside of the crotch because we only need this lower section. And the last thing we need to do is the pants hoop. We're going to start off by plugging in a composite because we want to separate the hoop into the line and the color art. Plug both of them in, and we want to cut with an invert cutter the loop, because we want this loop to only be inside of the belt. So we go to the belt, we take it, we plug it in, it's now inside of the belt. The one issue, anti-aliasing. This is because when you cut something by something, the thing behind it is actually just slightly larger, especially if there's textures or anything, which there's going to be. So the solution to solve this is to remove this from the equation. So we have something cutting into the belt already. If we put a composite into this connection, we can actually plug multiple things into this composite, and one of those is going to be the color art, because the color art is longer than the belt. So if we plug it in, no more anti-aliasing. That is it for rigging the body. We're now going to go into making a hierarchy. Again, with the last episode, this is very subjective. Plug anything in to what seems logical. You know, the hand should connect to the forearm should connect to the upper arm should connect to the shoulder. That kind of logic. I'll do one section just to kind of give you an idea, and then you can figure it out yourself. Obviously, you're not going to be rigging this character. You're going to be rigging your own character. So you'll have a completely different setup than I will. Pelvis, everything comes into the pelvis. So that is going to have a pelvis awl peg. Things that are connected to it is the pelvis cutter, the crotch, the hoops, the zipper, crease. And then for the pocket and the stitching, we're going to connect these two. So they're always pretty much moving together. So we'll give those an extra peg. I'm going to call that pocket_01 awl. Plug that into the pelvis awl peg, and same with the back pocket. That was extremely easy. A lot of the things on this body aren't connected to one another. So having this section connected to the back pocket doesn't make any sense. The crotch will always be by itself. The pants hoop specifically stays in this section because the belt needs to move. And now that I think of it, I'm actually going to move the pants hoop away from the body and stick with the belt. I think logically, if you're moving the belt, you're gonna want to move the hoop at the same time, or at least keep them semi-close. So we're going to make some room. Put it in front of everything. And swap the connection. And then now just go through and peg everything else. Okay, so the hierarchy is made for everything relevant. The very specific things we're going to do is the collar is going to connect to the body, but the neck itself is going to have a special peg called neck plus head. And this is going to be the next parent of the head. The body master is going to immediately connect to the arms. So body plus arms Then it's going to connect to the head. This is going to connect to everything from the head to the arms to the torso and down to the pelvis. The pelvis is going to be separated from the legs. This is just from experience working on projects. A lot of people will put the legs and the pelvis together, but it doesn't make a lot of sense movement wise and locking wise and just general animation. So a lot of the time the pelvis will count towards the upper body and the legs will just be completely separated. The next peg after this is going to be the lower body, and that's everything here plus the legs. But we'll get to that when we start making the... So now that all of the parent pegs are made, we're going to just start assigning pivots to everything. I'm actually going to change some of the hierarchy here and have the torso not connect for a while. So we kind of want the shirt to only move with the arms, with the head, and then eventually the upper body. Because it's never really necessary to rotate this section of the body, especially if it's going to just break with the pelvis. So pretty much everything is going to rotate from the t-shirt. The one thing we've got to do is to just test out some stuff. So if we grab the zipper and then just hit B and go through everything, just make sure it all connects in a nice way. See, for example, this is in the wrong position. So just go around clicking everything and see if it logically makes sense where it is. And we can also just mess around with a few stuff to see how flexible objects can be. So this is kind of our limit for the t-shirt. I think that's good enough. We want to be able to see if we can get kind of 3D motions. So pull the shirt up, pull the back down. I think that works. We get a nice 3D effect. Bend the shoulders. Does the spaceship move? So we applied this node to get a bit of squash and stretch as we rotate the character. But it seems to work. Check the render to make sure nothing is breaking or has too much anti-aliasing. Far away, you're not going to notice anything. Make sure if a line has a overlay and a line art, it's not too thick that it's noticeable. This line is going to be invisible, so we won't notice the kind of sudden bulge here. And we're going to apply the texture, which was an earlier step, but I've completely forgot about it. But you can do this anytime. You can do this at the end of the rig as well. You don't have to do it each individual time. So we'll go do bumpy. We'll go to contour editor, edit gradient, and just stretch this by double. And now everything is textured. This line connection here is not super necessary to cover because it's going to be covered by this loop, and in most of the other views it's not connected to the belt. So there's no point of adding some sort of fancy cutter to it. Now that everything is made and textured and deformed, all we have to do is clean up. You might notice that we're missing sections, so the other hoops and the loops and the belt and the shoulder piece. Again, because the duplicates, we're going to do that at the end, later on, before we start posing. I find it easy to just go through the stages rather than completely building everything in one view and then going through all the different processes and then doing it again the second time. I find it easier to just do all of the posing, all of the deformers, all of the coloring, all of the reposing. To make sure everything is clean and tidy, we're going to take the head, move it back over, and line everything up. So just to make sure all of the pegs are of general height. See, these pegs are actually a lot shorter, so we're going to grab the pegs, shift them up a bit. We're going to grab the deformers, shift them up. This is important. A lot of the time, you're gonna have to select a lot of things at the same time, and you want to be able to select all the drawings at the same time or all of the pegs. You don't want other stuff getting in the way, especially later when we're going to be cleaning up the file. So everything is of level. We're gonna move this away a bit. Make a backdrop. So edit, insert backdrop. This backdrop is going to have to get edited later on because of adding new duplicates. Make sure everything's kind of tidy. They generally look the same height. Give a color and a name. If we're going to go in rainbow order, we're going to have the head and then both arms, then the body, then the legs. So red was first, and then orange, and then green. So we can give this bluish color and call it the body. And go down to each of the sections. So the neck, insert backdrop, and call it neck. So everything is tidy, everything is even. We have names for everything. We have the pegs all set up, and we're done. That is going to be the end of the body section. And next week we're going to be doing the arms. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. See you next time.